Welcome to MicroCosmos. This week we are going to talk about the Galileo spacecraft. This was a mission set to further study the Jovian system. This mission was initially called Jupiter Orbiter Probe, and it started development at the JPL in 1977. Later on, they changed the name after the Italian scientists. Jupiter was previously visited by Pioneer 10 and 11 and Voyager 1 and 2 during the 1970s, but only flyby missions. NASA wanted to orbit a gas giant to study that system more in depth. The spacecraft had 16 instruments. It also had the Galileo probe that entered Jupiter's atmosphere. To power the spacecraft, NASA used RTGs, because at the time, solar panels at Jupiter's distance from the Sun were simply not practical. Same goes for chemical batteries that would need to be huge. Galileo was planned to be launched during the early days of the space shuttle, but after several delays, it was set to launch on board the Atlantis in 1986. After the unfortunate Challenger disaster in January, all the shuttles were grounded. It was finally set to launch in 1989, but the mission had to be reprofiled. The previous plan was to use a Centaur G booster stage that was fueled with liquid hydrogen. This booster would allow a direct trajectory from Earth to Jupiter, but the new shuttle safety protocols prohibited the use of the Centaur G boosters. Galileo had to use the solid booster inertial upper stage, or IUS. Since this upper stage was less powerful, they had to plan several gravity assists. Finally, on October 18, 1989, from LC-39B, the mission STS-34 blasts off to space. Space Shuttle Atlantis carries Galileo to low Earth orbit, and then the IOS booster sends it on its way to Venus. The spacecraft flew by Venus on February 1990. Then, as it flew by Earth on December 8, 1990, Galileo ran some experiments to see if life on Earth could be easily detected from space. This was Carl Sagan's idea, of course, and those results are now known as the Sagan criteria for life. Then, the main antenna failed to fully deploy. This happened because Galileo spent almost 5 years in storage after the Challenger disaster, and the lubricants that were supposed to help deploy the antenna were worn away. This wasn't checked before launch. Fortunately, there was a low-gain antenna that was able to communicate with Earth. In 1994, the spacecraft was perfectly positioned to watch fragments of the comet Shoemaker-Levy 9 crash into Jupiter. In 1995, Galileo released its probe that entered Jupiter's atmosphere to study the environment. It transmitted for 58 minutes until the pressure exceeded 23 atmospheres. The main Galileo spacecraft arrived on December 7th and orbited the gas giant 35 times. Galileo made some groundbreaking discoveries, namely the first observation of ammonia clouds in another planet. It confirmed that the moon Io has a great volcanic activity. It confirmed that Ganymede has its own magnetic field, and gathered evidence that supports the theory that Europa, Callisto and Ganymede have liquid water under the surface as well as a thin atmospheric layer. Finally, in the early 2000s, the fuel was running low, and the intense radiation near Jupiter severely crippled some of the instruments. Because the probe wasn't sterilized, there was a chance of contaminating the moons with Earth bacteria. So, Mission Control decided to crash Galileo on Jupiter. After the 35th orbit, the probe impacted the planet on September 21st, 2003. Alright, hope you guys enjoyed this episode. If you like what we do, please consider leaving a like or subscribe, and have a good week!